There are a lot of different card games out there, but even the very best and most popular card games are bound to have at least one thing that sucks about them, even my favorite card games. So get ready to be offended, because I am coming for your favorite card game as we are covering the worst single thing about every single major card game. Give the video a like and subscribe for more content like this. Let's start with the founding father of card games, Magic the Gathering. The worst thing about Magic the Gathering is mana screw. Magic the Gathering is the card game which all of the other card games in this list are built on. And I think its biggest weakness is highlighted by how other modern card games have tried to improve upon its resource system. In Magic the Gathering, you have your lands, which are your mana cards, and your main deck cards all in one big deck. If you look at modern card games, many modern card games have improved upon this system. For example, in Riftbound and One Piece, you have two separate decks. You have your mana deck and you have your main deck. In Disney Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited, every card or most of the cards that you will have in your hand can either be played as a card or as a resource. So many other card games have identified this big weakness of Magic the Gathering from a design perspective, which is the mana screw. If you draw too much mana, you can be in a really bad spot because you have all sorts of mana in hand and not enough cards to play, or the opposite can happen where you don't have enough mana to play all the cards you need. That is just a fundamental design flaw of Magic the Gathering, which other card games have had 30 years to improve upon. Cardmarket sponsor this video. Cardmarket is the biggest online marketplace for trading card games in Europe. Now, we know how big and successful Pokemon is, and the worst thing about Pokemon is scalpers making product inaccessible for players. Pokemon card game collecting is crazy. If you go to a local card show, you're gonna see 90% Pokemon and very, very little of anything else. It's an extremely popular collector's item. However, that can be a downside when new products are hot in demand, because of course, scalpers are gonna be out in full force. We've all seen those videos from your Costco's in America with middle-aged men and women fighting over children's card games. It's not what anybody wants to see. And of course, the issue here is that players that want to play Pokemon are going to potentially be priced out of new products, whether that's kids, families, or just your general player. Scalpers are not good for the game. I think we can all agree on that. And Pokemon is without doubt the game that suffers the most because of scalpers. But let's not forget, there are scalpers in Pokemon because it is so successful. Let's round off the big three by talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! The worst thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is how inaccessible it is for new players. We've covered Pokemon and Magic, which are thriving, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Seems to be struggling. And in my opinion, the main reason for that, and the worst thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the new player experience. And let me tell you, this is coming firsthand because I competed last year at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Regional event. I gave myself a week to learn a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck. I learned all the combo pieces of my own deck using Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel to learn it. I showed up to the regionals, but I was just not prepared for the absolute mammoth text and combos that my opponents would be pulling off each game. It is without doubt the worst card game experience I have ever had by a country mile. Let me be clear, my opponents were lovely, they were encouraging, they were helpful, but it was just unbelievably overwhelming. My opponent would often be taking 30 actions in their first turn, asking if I would like to respond. Every time they would play a card, I would have to read a massive wall of text. Now, many Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have told me that once you play Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit more, you sort of learn how to read these cards where you can skip massive parts of the text. But the bottom line is that the amount of text on a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card and the amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards which can be played in a single turn in a big combo is overwhelming for new players. And I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to continue to struggle to get new players, and that's just going to be a big problem for a game that's as old as Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. Let's move away then from paper card games for now and focus a little bit on some of the most successful digital card games, starting off with the big boss of digital card games. It's Hearthstone. The The worst thing about Hearthstone is that randomness is part of its identity. Hearthstone is a game which was immensely popular. It totally dominated Twitch back in its heyday. But my least favorite thing about Hearthstone is how randomness is not a side effect, but rather a design pillar. The randomness of Hearthstone is built in. It's a core identity of Hearthstone. Of course, there's huge skill involved in Hearthstone. There's still a thriving competitive scene, but the emotional experience is that the game often celebrates variance so hard that it undermines player agency. You can make the correct strategic choice and still lose because the game decided to generate the perfect answer or the perfect damage pattern. It's great for clips, it's great for wow moments, but it also means a lot of losses just end up feeling bad. The next card game has something so bad about it that it went from one of my favorite card games of all time to my least favorite card game of all time. I'm talking about Marvel Snap. The worst thing about Marvel Snap is its monetization pressure. And if you've played Marvel Snap, you probably already know where this is heading. I am talking about, of course, the worst thing about Marvel Snap being the monetization approach. Marvel Snap is all about FOMO and trying to dangle that carrot in front of its audience to eke out every single penny they can possibly get. And Marvel Snap's popularity has fallen off an absolute cliff. It made an unbelievably big amount of money in its first couple of years, but its player base has spoken with their wallets and has got fed up with the approach of Marvel Snap. Whether it's a season pass card locked behind a paywall, a big bundle, or new cards which are very weird to get, that you have to get some weird currency which ultimately leads you down to the holy grail of all card games, the credit card. Marvel Snap was spoiled by its aggressive monetization practices. It's why I stopped creating content for Marvel Snap, and it is without doubt the single worst thing about any card game on this list. Even worse than Scalpers. Maybe not. Maybe it's not worse than Scalpers, but it's level with Scalpers at the very least. Well, let's move back into the realm of physical card games, starting with the talk of the town right now. It's Riftbound, the League of Legends trading card game, a game that I have a podcast for, Into the Rift, and I cover this game at length on this very channel. The worst thing about Riftbound is the friction from its rough launch. Riftbound's an easy home run for me, isn't it? You already know where this is going. Riftbound's launch has been a bit of a stinker in terms of the product supply. It's almost impossible to get your hands on Riftbound, particularly in North America. I think if we look at the Proving Grounds product in particular, this is a product which was aimed at new players, but Riot decided to include some cards in this Proving Grounds product which are unique to it. And as it happened, two of the best leaders in Riftbound can only be found in this extremely short printed product. That means that you've got local game stores selling, and scalpers of course, this product at well over 4 times the recommended retail price. The game is extremely inaccessible because of how short printed it is. But I wanted to go a little bit further and talk about Riftbound's biggest weakness is how it is rough around the edges on launch. No, literally, it is rough around the edges. It's sometimes you open a pack and it's like you need to sand your cards down afterwards. Now, to be completely fair to Riot, they've come out, they've held their hands up, they've communicated clearly, saying that they want to improve upon this and the cutting issues are going to be fixed for set 2. But I think it's actually a good analogy for the wider picture and the wider issues of Riftbound, which it does just feel a little bit rough around the edges at times. For example, you've got a ton of cards which have received erratas. The rules are a little bit confusing at times and they're often making adjustments. Now, I don't doubt that Riot are going to sort that out in the medium term, not even the long term, but it's certainly the worst thing about Riftbound right now, that it's just impossible to get product, and overall the launch has been rough around the edges. Disney Lorcana up next, a card game I absolutely adore and I cover here on this very channel. The worst thing about Disney Lorcana is that competitive decks don't feel Disney enough. I did recently make a video covering lots of the problems Disney Lorcana is currently facing, and I think the biggest issue I have right now with the game is how the Disney theme just isn't quite finding its way into the competitive decks. There's one deck in the current Disney Lorcana meta which has a real big theme behind it, which is Lady and the Tramp, but there just aren't enough of those styles of decks. Most of the competitive decks in Disney Lorcana are just sort of mid-range good stuff, where you play a good card on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and you go off to the races. I want to extend this one step further into the starter decks. I think that the Disney Lorcana starter decks need to be improved significantly. There's a big opportunity with a Disney card game to give new players a themed Disney deck on their favorite film, which can then be upgraded into a competitive deck. But right now, it's impossible to play a deck with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in a competitive setting. It's impossible to play a Lion King themed deck. And I think for a Disney card game, that is a real shame. Rather than getting starter decks with Elsa and Wreck-It Ralph, maybe we should start getting starter decks with Mufasa and Scar, or Simba and Scar, or Ariel and that little crab Sebastian. Is he a lobster? I don't really know. Is he a lobster? Star Wars Unlimited up next, a game with absolutely outstanding gameplay, slightly questionable art at times. I'm a proud owner of this Luke Skywalker you see here, which is so scuffed that I can't help but love him. The worst thing about Star Wars Unlimited is that the chase lives outside the main product. How the product experience, the product opening experience of the main product line of Star Wars Unlimited feels flat. A big reason for this is that Star Wars Unlimited introduced Carbonite boosters. Carbonite boosters, if you've played Magic the Gathering, are akin to a collector box. It's a product which is significantly more expensive, around 5 times more expensive than a standard booster, which contains a bunch of shiny cards, including a special kind of alternative artwork card called Prestige cards. These Prestige cards are not available in the normal booster packs. And this has had a really negative impact on the Star Wars Unlimited market overall. If the best looking, most desirable versions of card live only in the premium product lanes, it changes how the normal boxes feel to open. And for a TCG, box excitement matters. It matters for your local game store. It matters for also your secondary markets, because if there's the normal holo version of a legendary, but there's also this awesome alternative artwork legendary that's only available in a different product line, it just leaves the game in a little bit of a weird place. The chase isn't in the main product, and you get this weird vibe where players feel like they're opening the regular version while the real hits exist somewhere else. Gundam up next, and this is probably the biggest hot take of the entire video. I feel like a lot of Gundam fans are going to be unhappy with me about this one, but remember, it is just my opinion. The worst thing about the Gundam trading card game is forced pilot mech pairings. In Gundam, you have Gundams or mechs, and you have a pilot, and you can pair any pilot to any mech. However, there's some pilots and some mechs which pair together specifically, and you get what's called a link pair. Link pairs will often have some powerful specific effects, but whenever you get this link pair, your Gundam will be able to attack the turn you play it. Usually when you play a Gundam or a mech, it's going to have summoning sickness, essentially, where it can't attack immediately, but suddenly if you achieve that link pair, you can attack swiftly. It's a huge tempo swing, and it's a cool mechanic at first, but the more I played Gundam, the more I built decks, the more I grew to hate this mechanic. In game, the swing can be brutal. If your opponent draws into the link pair and you don't, you feel like you lose the game on the spot at times. So it really feels like it adds a lot of draw variance to the game. Added to that, I think the final nail in the coffin for this, for me, was when I started deck building, and I just found it to be a little bit of a chore and very restrictive that I could only pair certain pilots with certain mechs. Like if I'm gonna play this mech, I need to play this pilot. And overall, I just found this one mechanic to be quite unenjoyable. And unfortunately, it's the main mechanic of the game, which is why I decided Gundam wasn't for me. Gwent the Witcher card game up next, my favorite card game of all time. But Gwent's biggest weakness, the worst thing about Gwent, is its identity crisis it had throughout its life cycle and how that disrupted its player base. Gwent started off as a mini game within The Witcher 3 and then released as a standalone. But we went from 3 rows to 2 with Gwent Homecoming, and when Homecoming was released after quite a few delays and basically the game was put on hold for 6 months and said, yeah, we'll be right back, the game was totally and utterly different. In the long run, I think the game became quite a bit better, but Gwent Homecoming at that moment when it released was the worst Gwent had ever been and ever was. And it alienated a huge part of its player base who fell in love with the original Gwent, but then just couldn't get to grips with the new idea of Gwent. If you haven't played Gwent, play Gwent. It's so good, mate. I swear to God, best card game of all time. Legends of Runeterra, from the same sort of era of Gwent in card games, which is card games that were almost too generous for their own good. The worst thing about Legends of Runeterra is how often it shuts down your big plays. You could set up a big combo, you could pop off, but your opponent could almost just say no. And that could feel quite brutal. And that's how the spell system is designed. And actually Riftbound has something quite similar going on there as well. But I think in Runeterra it felt particularly bad at times. The stack and interaction system is extremely deep. It creates huge real decision making, but it also means your big moment, your big pop off can get denied, your combo disrupted, and the game teaches you very quickly that optimism is punishable. For competitive players, that's interesting. For newer players, it can feel like you never get to do the fun thing you built your deck to do. It's a very brilliant game, but also you learn very quickly that you don't always get to do what you want to do. And I think for Legends of Runeterra, which was the game that a lot of League of Legends players, for example, you would expect to be the audience that haven't played card games before, that was probably a tough barrier for players to get over. I always hear brilliant things about Flesh and Blood. It's a real card gamer's card game. If you're an experienced card gamer, you'll probably love Flesh and Blood. It's a precision game. It's extremely high skill ceiling where there are so many opportunities to outplay your opponent. But that, to its credit, is also arguably its biggest weakness. The worst thing about Flesh and Blood is its barrier to entry. When you first play Flesh and Blood, you are going to lose an awful lot, and that can be tough to take for new players. So I think Flesh and Blood, to its credit, its biggest weakness is that the skill ceiling is so high, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming for new players. I think that's probably the best worst thing about any card game in this list. So good job, Flesh and Blood. Well done. Last but by certainly no means least, we've got the One Piece trading card game. The worst thing about One Piece is that demand has outpaced access for players. One Piece is probably the most hyped up card game in the world right now. Maybe Riftbound would have something to say about that, but One Piece has really established itself. It's been around for a few years, and it's honestly pushing Yu-Gi-Oh! Quite hard to potentially overtake Yu-Gi-Oh! And become the third biggest card game in the world. But that hype has also led in some of what people might refer to as the Pokemon Bros. Bandai don't really reprint product in One Piece, which means that a lot of people are treating One Piece as an investment opportunity. If you are investing in One Piece and leaving product sealed, that means that that is product which is not getting on the table to be played. So when supply doesn't re-enter circulation fast enough, you get the collision where players and investors are competing for the same boxes. Suddenly, I want to build a deck and play locals, turned into why is it impossible to find this at a normal price. A lot of the Pokemon Bros, as people like to call them, have their eyes on One Piece. The moment an IP gets hot, the market shows up, the hype moves in, and players end up last in line. So while One Piece is doing brilliantly, maybe Bandai need to have a rethink about how they handle reprints to avoid investors increasing the price of the game too much for the people that really want to play it. Thanks again to Cardmarket for sponsoring this video. Cardmarket is the biggest online marketplace for trading card games in Europe. So there we have it, the worst thing about every single major card game. Let me know if there's any card games I didn't cover and the worst thing about them. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Let me know in the comments and let's have a chat below. Thanks again so much for watching. Give the video a like and subscribe for more card game content.